Tonight on Canton Confidential, we're hearing first-hand accounts.
Something out of the ordinary, like a black blob in the ground by the flagpole.
And brand new details.
Lally asked me how big it was, so I just told him right now, yeah.
From those at the Albert home that fateful night.
Nothing out of the ordinary, correct?
Correct.
As Karen Reed's lawyers hit hard.
You were in that photo, correct?
Yes.
Leaving us with more questions.
And against that white snow, did you see a black baseball cap?
Than answers.
Absolutely not.
We're bringing you today's biggest moments from court. Right now on Canton Confidential, the Karen Reed murder trial.
Well, it was a half day of testimony, but a full day of details about what was going on inside the Albert household just before John O'Keefe was found in the snow. I'm Glenn Jones.
I'm JC Monahan. After all the testimony we heard today, we can say there are even more questions about who exactly was in the home, when they were in the home, and what they may have seen take place. There were 4 witnesses today. It began with Caitlyn Albert. She was back on the stand. She is the daughter of Brian Albert.
We also heard from her boyfriend, Tristan Morris, who says he picked her up late that night. And we heard from 2 friends of Brian Albert Jr., Sarah Levinson and Julie Nagel. They were also there celebrating Brian Jr.'s birthday. Julie's testimony may have been the most explosive. She testified she saw something in the yard while she was leaving that night.
Our Kirsten Glavin has some of the big moments from today.
You solemnly swear the evidence given to the court and carrying the case now hearing the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you. You can take a seat.
Back on the stand, Caitlyn Albert, daughter of Nicole and Brian Albert, the homeowners at 34 Fairview Road in Canton. Albert questioned about her friendship with Katie McLaughlin, a paramedic who previously testified that she heard Karen Reed admit, quote, "I hit him," after John O'Keefe's body was found.
Isn't it true that only 8 months before January 29th of 2022, you and Katie McLaughlin were at a baby shower together?
Objection.
Do you know that?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead and answer.
Yes, we did.
Albert grilled about a beach day, road trips, and other events with McLaughlin, even shown photos.
And Katie McLaughlin is on the right of me.
Okay. She's right next to you in that photo, correct?
Yes, she is.
That was in June of 2021, correct?
Yes.
So if somebody testified that you hadn't seen each other in 3 years prior to January 29th of 2022, that would be wrong, right?
Objection.
Dan.
Early last week, Reed's defense claiming McLaughlin lied under oath about their closeness.
It's very clear to us that Katie McLaughlin perjured herself.
Albert's boyfriend, Tristan Morris, next up, testifying that when he picked Albert up from the house to bring her back to their home in Easton, he did not see O'Keefe's body outside.
You also did not see 45 pieces of red plastic?
No.
Or even 1 piece?
No.
And you certainly did not see a 6'2" man on the lawn of your girlfriend's parents' home, correct?
No, I did not.
You saw nothing unusual in that front area of the lawn, correct?
No, I did not.
Other friends in the house that night stating the same.
You see a 6'2", 220-pound man sprawled out right in front of you on that lawn?
No.
Fair to say that walking out the front door of that house, you saw no body on that front lawn in front of you, correct?
When I walked out?
Correct.
No.
But it was this testimony from Julie Nagel that turned heads.
I did notice something out of the ordinary, like a black blob in the ground by the flagpole.
Nagel testifying that she saw an object on the lawn when she was in a car getting a ride home.
5 or 6 feet, like long, but.
And at the time that you're driving by at that point, you could tell what it was?
Not quite sure, no.
When pressed by Reed's attorney,
the fact of the matter is you did nothing, right?
Yeah.
And that's because you did not see a body on that lawn, correct?
Objection.
And outside of court, the defense doubling down.
If she actually saw something that could potentially have been a body, then that would have been the most important evidence in this case. It's what they don't have. And it materializes in October of 2022, almost 9 months after the fact. It's just crazy.
What?
And Kirsten Glavin is here with us tonight.
And Kirsten, you have the pleasure or the burden of watching all the testimony. We want to play one moment for you, and we'll talk about it on the other side.
What time did you leave the waterfall?
I don't remember.
Did you leave at 5 p.m.?
I don't remember.
So it could have been 5 p.m. that you left.
Could have been 5 in the morning. I don't know.
That, of course, is Tristan Morris, Caitlyn Albert's boyfriend, and during cross-examination, he was unable to recall many details about the timeline that night. So how did that play in court? I guess I especially want to know, when the prosecutor was asking him questions, was he expecting him to be light on details, or was that a surprise to him as well?
It seemed like a surprise. What you just heard there was really an example of what we heard all throughout his testimony. It was very vague, unfortunately. He couldn't recall a lot of times. At one point, we heard the defense say, were you coached? Were you asked not to specify times of things? And he said, no, not at all. But it was tough to get an answer out of him for a lot of the questions that were posed his way. And I do want to add that I think that we've really seen the defense turn up the heat ever since yesterday during Brian Albert's cross-examination. The defense has been going after a lot of these witnesses with very difficult questions, so it was a little jarring to get no response, especially from Tristan Morris today on a lot of those questions, or just, you know, I don't recall, things of that nature.
You've been outside this court as well, not just inside the court. Before, we saw all of the supporters, and there are both sides out in front of the court. Now that we're 3 weeks into the trial, or on week 3, what is it like outside? Do we still have large crowds?
JC, we do. So there are the crowds there every day, rain or shine. They are out there in their pink supporting Karen Read. It's died down a little bit depending on the day, but they're still there with their signs and, you know, listening to the trial on a speaker. You really can't go 5 minutes either without hearing honking of horns. It's right at a busy intersection there. People are honking their horns, screaming out the windows, free Karen Read. A lot of people are very invested in this case, and it's clear, even if you're not inside the courtroom.
And you've been reporting they're still trying to get closer, some of those supporters, to the actual courthouse. So we'll have to see how that pans out.
They are. I think they know it's a long shot, but they're still giving it a go because they do want to move closer to the actual courthouse. So we'll see where that goes.
Kirsten, thank you so much. We've really been so valuable having your reporting. Coming up next, we'll be joined by our courtroom insider, Sue O'Connell.
She says there was one moment in court that elicited a reaction from Karen Read. We'll have that for you when we come back. We're joined now by our court insider, Sue O'Connell. You were inside court again today.
Indeed.
Multiple people on the stand. And there was one thing I think that was easy to take away from it, which is how difficult it was to get any of these witnesses who were there the night at the Brian Albert house, the night that John O'Keefe was found, to give details of what happened that night in terms of coming and going.
And simple details and simple answers. And it seems like some of them were being evasive, and that's something you don't want the jury to see. And they're being evasive about details that don't seem to be that important. While they certainly could remember a number of things, and then there's certainly a number of things that you would forget, like who came first, who was sitting where, who did this or that. I mean, it was 2 years ago. Many of them weren't interviewed until October of that year, if not later, or
so
if ever.
6+ months
later. So you forget things. It's normal. But when it comes to sort of simple things that you think you would remember, especially if someone had died that night, a number of them were being evasive. And you could see the jury tilting their heads, writing things down, checking their notes.
So what do you think? The jury seems to have taken note of it, but again, just go over a couple of them. A couple of them were Alberts that were on. Caitlyn Albert was cross-examined, and then her boyfriend Tristan. And the key there was he seemed to have the least amount of information in terms of remembering when he showed up to pick Caitlyn up.
Indeed. So Caitlyn Albert says that her boyfriend Tristan Morris, was with them at Waterfall at the beginning, with the Waterfall Bar and Grill. He left because he was going to be on call to be a snowplow driver. So he left, and then at some point, she asked him to come back and pick her up at her childhood home, the Albert home, to drive her home. They lived in Easton. They lived together. So her story was, he was always going to go home, come back and get me in a snowstorm, and then go back. That's a 25-minute trip each way when he was going to get up at 3 to go snowplow. He gets on the stand today, and he can't even tell us what time he was there. Were you there at 5 o'clock in the afternoon? Were you there at 9 o'clock at the Waterfall?
So something basic like that we can't really pin down.
Yeah, I went there for dinner. Right. I don't know if it was 5 or 7, but I had dinner, and then I picked her up, and it was after midnight or before midnight. again, something you might not remember 2 years later, but this is around the death of someone that happened at the house that you were at. You think that those kind of things would really sear into your mind, and it just raises the question, why?
Well, it did
What's worth it?
That is the question I think we're all asking, right, on these details. There was a Julie who took the stand today and it got a little combative at times with the defense attorney, Yannetti, who was trying to get those details out of her. We have a little sound, if you didn't hear it today, that I want to play for you, and then on the other side, get your reaction to what happened in court. Take a listen to this. This is, again, Brian Albert Jr.'s friend who was at that home that night, asked by the defense about the details over what she called a black object or a blob that she saw in the front yard that night.
You also never, ever told any investigator that this black object that you described was actually 5 feet or 6 feet long, correct?
Correct, yes.
The very first time you're now mentioning this testimony that this black object, as you describe it, was actually 5 or 6 feet long was just today, after 12 noon on May 14th of 2024, correct?
Lally asked me how big it was, so I just told him right now, yeah.
Yeah, Lally, when you say Lally, you mean Mr. Lally?
Yes, Mr. Lally, correct, yes.
So, of course, what's important about that, JC, is that John O'Keefe was over 6 feet tall. She had this black blob that she's testifying to that she saw. Never said what the size of it was before. She's, I think, implying that she never was asked, which is fair enough. When she said that, Lally asked me, who is, of course, Assistant District Attorney prosecutor, Karen Reed let out a sound like a blah, and Helen Jackson actually had to lean over and stare at her to make sure she wasn't laughing out loud at court. But it's sort of, that's where we are. You know, did it not occur to you the day after, if you woke up, that there was a dead body found on the lawn or a body found on the lawn that died, that perhaps you want to say, I saw this 5 to 6 foot blob there? It didn't come up. And that's sort of the why. Why would you not, is the question I think jurors are having.
Okay, well, and a lot of us are, because the last thing I want to touch on with you are the texts that she sent her brother. So once again, the specifics of what they were trying to get today was the coming and going at the Albert house that night. And Julie sent texts to her brother saying, come get me. He shows up. She says, never mind, I'm going to stay. He goes. But what was it that they were trying to pull there?
And then she and her friend Sarah Levinson leave with the McCabe's, Jen and Matt McCabe, who drive them home. Well, it turns out, according to testimony, that Jen McCabe asked Julie for the text exchange, a screenshot of the text exchange between her and her brother about coming to pick them up. Why? What's so important about that text exchange? Why didn't Julie leave when her brother came? Why did she decide to stay? Why did she go home with the McCabes? I mean, you know, she admitted on the stand that she had been drinking. She had been at the house for a long time.
Like
it was
5 o'clock, I think she said.
You know, everybody was having a good time. There's no challenges around that. But it's just a question of why would that text exchange be important for Jen McCabe to see if she just decided, hey, she testified, I invited my brother to come in and his friends. They said no, they went home, I left, no biggie. So why?
Once again, we're left with more questions and answers, but the trial's not over yet, Sue.
We got a lot to go.
You got to get back in the court tomorrow.
I'll do my best. I'll be up early.
Sue O'Connell, thank you so much, and Glenn, back to you.
Okay, when we come back, we'll be joined by a trial lawyer with a big following on YouTube. He's been watching the case closely from Florida and breaking down witness testimony. He'll do that for you when we come back.
Then we get to her redirect. She doesn't know if the front lights were on. And on cross, he's like, nobody asked where you were looking. On cross, Yannetti's like, nobody asked. Why do you keep saying you were looking at Tristan or your attention was on Tristan? Why do you keep saying that? Nobody asked. And then what does Lally do on redirect? He's like, let me ask you a question. Where were you looking when you guys left? It's like, so now somebody asked.
That's Peter Tros. He's a trial lawyer in Clearwater, Florida, and host of Lawyer You Know on YouTube. And he joins us live tonight to talk about the trial. And Peter, I've been watching you since the last time you were on Canton Confidential. You do an excellent job breaking down witness testimony. So why don't we start there? I think you have already said on your YouTube channel that the witnesses we've seen who were at the house have been slightly more valuable to the prosecution than the law enforcement witnesses we saw earlier. But they're still really light on details, it seems like. I'm wondering if you think the climate surrounding this trial, where people are being sort of lampooned on social media, makes these witnesses less likely to be candid and be a little bit guarded when they're on the witness stand.
I think so much is going on with this case, with federal investigations and grand jury testimony and interviews with different law enforcement agencies, that they're all a little nervous. I think everybody's a little scared and nervous about their testimony. I think they're trying to keep it straight. But I think at least the prosecution is starting to connect certain dots that make us think, okay, now I start to understand why they have the timeline they have and why they think Karen Read did this.
Can we talk about why it took so long for some of these people to be interviewed in the first place? So today was all about connecting them to that house that night. But one of those people that happened to be Caitlyn Albert's boyfriend, Tristan, he didn't speak to investigators until last week, and that was for the first time. Is that typical, not typical?
It is so atypical, it's not even funny. I mean, all of these witnesses that were there on property, at the location where the body was found, and none of them were spoken to. I think the most recent one was 9 months after the incident happened for the younger people that were there at the house that night, walked through the yard, and we find out someone actually did see something in the yard, but she was drunk that night, admittedly, didn't make a big deal about it, and didn't talk to law enforcement until 9 months later. You have Tristan, who didn't talk to law enforcement until after the trial started. So that's going to be up to the jury to determine how credible are these witnesses, or do they think they got their story straight and are helping each other out?
You've been very critical of the prosecution, at least in the early going of this trial. But tonight you seem to maybe just pivot a little bit to say that they're connecting some dots. Do you see the prosecution making progress to proving that Karen Read did this?
My criticism is really centered around so much repetition of things that don't prove that Karen Read committed this crime. That it was snowing outside, who was at the house, who was at the waterfall ball, where the band was, things like that. And I think that at least today, and again, the bar is not very high with how this trial has started over the first 2 weeks, but at least today, they had a witness say, at the time in question when they believe this incident happened, a witness, an eyewitness, saw a black blob 5 to 6 feet long, which matches the description-ish of John O'Keefe in the yard when she drove by. At least they've done that. So we have some record evidence the prosecution can argue.
Peter, we're down to our final seconds here, but a quick question. There was Sarah Levinson. She was one of the friends at the parties who said, yes, the defense reached out to her. She never talked to them. You can do that? Just say, I'm not going to talk to you before the trial?
In certain jurisdictions, if there's no subpoena, you don't have to talk to them. And I thought she gave a pretty good answer on redirect where she said, I reached out to them and respectfully declined because legally I don't have to talk to them.
All right. Peter Tros, thank you. If you want to hear more from Peter, be sure to head to Lawyer You Know on YouTube. And coming up, this is a complicated case. We've thrown out a lot of names just in the last 2 minutes, and we want to help keep track of it for you.
Our new interactive family tree showing Canton's connections when we come back. Welcome back to Canton Confidential. Listen, we know there have been a lot of names and connections brought into place during this trial. We're going to have more than 100 witnesses before it's all said and done. So we thought it would be helpful to show you some of the people who have testified so far, including people in the Albert family. This is a diagram to help you follow along.
One of our viewers, Greg, actually sent us this suggestion, saying it would be beneficial would be to have a diagram of all the witnesses and their links to one another. And so that is something we've been working on for you. And as Glenn just referenced, here it is. Karen Read, of course, at the center of the case. And all you have to do is touch on one of the people, like a Brian Albert Sr. It tells you his role in all of this. Why is he on the witness stand? Because he was the homeowner of where John O'Keefe's body was found, who his friends are, who he's related to. And Glenn, that spreads out. The more people take the stand, the bigger this is going to get.
Right. And as you look across, you see Chris Albert, who is the brother of Brian Albert and a selectman in the town of Canton. So this is going to fill in over the course of the trial, and it should help you keep track of who is who so that you can follow along with developments.
If you visit NBC10Boston.com, you can click the Karen Read tab to find this tool. We'll continue, as we just said, to update it throughout the trial. And of course, if you have any questions for us, please send them in. Email them at canton.confidential@NBC10Boston.com.
JC, I know we made that for our viewers, but I'm going to be using it.
Oh, I'm definitely using it. It's really helpful. Again, there are so many people, places, names, and this is going to help keep it straight.
That's right. Testimony will resume tomorrow around 9 a.m. It's set to be a full day of court.
We, of course, will be streaming the trial on our website, our app, on YouTube, and on air. You can find it on NECN, so make sure you tune in tomorrow. We'll have another recap at 7 o'clock. Have a great night.